Now this is probably where you think I've lost it, right? Let's see what I can come up with. Okay, yes, there is more to it than just this one oversized oil painting replica of lilies. In this project, I'm going to be using all the products that I already have on hand. Leftover paints, leftover trim, a bifold door somebody gave to me, all of these things that I need to try to get out of my house before this move coming up. Not only am I going to come up with a custom build out of supplies I have on hand, but I'm going to turn it into a work of art too. If you're interested in seeing what I've got planned, stick with me till the end. Hi, my name is Packy, creator of Pack Rat's Shack. I upcycle furniture, build out of pallet wood, finish interior spaces, and have a vendor booth for my creations. Welcome to my world. I'm starting this project with a solid wood bifold door that someone gave me about a year or so ago, saying the same thing that I hear often. Here, I know you can do something really cool with this. I don't want it to just go to the landfill if you can build something and make money with it. Well, I knew I could. It's just that the perfect plan had never manifested for this piece until now. Of course, I'm going to start with a good cleaning and simple green. I mean, the piece, not me. I already took my shower today. Gosh! Okay, I'm not so good with the funnies, am I? Well, it was worth a try. Let's move on. Anyway, this video will be long enough as it is that you probably don't need to see every little step thoroughly, such as cleaning. Let's go ahead and move on. But I did want to show you this little trick before I moved on. If you ever have problem getting some grime out of the corners with your rag, just go ahead and flick that crud out with a cheap chip brush and then get in and clean the corner really well. See, you can tell this is a solid wood piece with how awkwardly I'm trying to turn it around and upside down without busting off any corners or letting it crash to the floor. Yeah, I almost pushed out a hip there. After that's all good and dry, I return to the project to fill all my holes and any imperfections that I choose to fill. I know this won't need to be a perfect finish because of the techniques that I'll be using to finish it, but I also don't want deep, ugly, unsightly gouges either. Then I go ahead and I sand the overfill back and scuff sand the whole piece, prepping it for the painting layers. Some areas needed a second coat of filler because filler just kind of shrinks back, so I usually always have to do it twice. Now, I already have a pretty good idea what I'm planning on doing, but I want to finalize my plan based on measurements to make sure that I have enough scraps on hand to build what I'm planning. And this is my plan. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Yes, I do actually have a college degree, even though this clearly looks like a plan that a fifth grader came up with. So let's get to cutting. I'll admit I don't have loads of experience in all of the woodworking skills and the proper use of all of the tools. And it takes me a minute to figure different angles and such out, but I get there in the end. Whether I can call everything by its actual name or just call everything thingy-madoogie, I don't really care, as long as I can figure it out and get to the end result. I keep checking that my bifold is positioned square to the corner in that 45-degree position, so that when I secure this top piece on, it is all aligned correctly, and so that I will secure it tightly into that correct alignment. I do have to trim some of the material back to make my top piece fit perfectly. Using clamps to hold the particle board while I'm cutting is a good way to make sure I'm cutting safely and keeping my hands clear from the blade. When I get my piece just right, I glue and finish nail it into place, but then I follow up with it by screwing it in and securing it tightly. Remember, this top piece and the bottom piece that I install the exact same way is what is going to hold this bifold in its rigid, solid 45-degree position. So they need to be strong. But in all actuality, the shelves will also reinforce this position and add strength to the overall piece. When I'm done building this piece, it is going to be solid as a rock. Let me tell you. So I had to reposition my bottom piece because working with the edge on the floor didn't work. I thought that if I applied the same downward pressure on the flat bifold as well as the bottom piece, that would align them, but once I checked it out, there was about an 1/8 inch difference. So I went ahead and removed that, stood the piece upside down so that the bottom could be up in the air like the top was. That way I can feel and see all the way around the piece while I go ahead and reinstall it. And I do it the exact same way as you saw me do the top piece. I also go ahead and cut the shelf pieces, but each shelf consists of 2 triangles that are glued together and clamped like a little sandwich. So I'm using the 3/4 inch particle board, and when I go ahead and sandwich 2 together, that gives me an 1.5 inch thickness for the shelf. I just really feel that this 1.5 inch not only looks more bulky and correct for the piece, but also it's just more meat for the pocket screws that I'm going to put onto it to pull it tight into that corner of the unit. You can see my sandwiched little triangles in the background while I'm figuring out how I'm going to build my base. This is where honestly I'm struggling with finding the correct angle. I'm trying to use this angle square, which I typically just use to mark my straight lines off of my marked line, but I really just don't think I understand how to use this for figuring angles. I came up with a wrong number and I cut a piece and it didn't work. So then I just relied on simple math that took a few minutes because I don't practice math and it's been a minute since I've used math. So anyways, I basically discover that 3 of my corners are 45 and I have a 5-corner triangle, which means that 3 45s equal 135 minus 180 equals you the negative 45, which really is another 45 angle, but you got 2 more corners to cut. So that means you divide that 45 that you have left over to make your 180 out of the 135 that you already have, and now you have 2 22.5 corners. Anyways, here's a drawing of what I meant, if that makes it clear. So after I did math and then cut my pieces to the 22.5 degrees, everything worked out just fine. And I'll just keep using my little plastic square thingy for straight lines until I can actually set aside some time to actually learn how to use it. So now I'm using my Craig jig to make my pocket holes to secure the base onto my bifold, which I'm actually just installing the base piece by piece on the unit. It's not like I've made a base and then I'm securing it to it. So, I mean, that's evident here while you're watching, but I can't believe it. Even though I made my directional marks that you saw me make, I still drilled it out backwards on the piece.
Oh, shit. Frick, I turned things around. I didn't even look at my arrows, apparently.
Oh well, I've just got to go run up and go get me another piece and cut it to size and get that correct angle back on the one end. So bada bing, I'm back. Here it is. I've done it right now, and woo, the base is installed without a hitch. Any more hitches, that is. So now I go ahead and trim my base out using pieces of leftover trim from my trim bin. I already figured my angle that I need my corners, which is at 22.5. So this is going to be a breeze because I'm basically just doing the exact same thing I did to install the base, except for I only have to do the front piece and the two return side pieces. I don't have to continue on around the back. So I glue and finish nail the trim into place. But these two end pieces are so small, I don't want to split them out, so I go ahead and just glue and tape them into place until they dry. Besides, I've watched a lot of woodworkers lately, and they're all saying that the glue is the strongest bond, not the hardware. So I'm going to rely on the glue in this situation. Now that my shelves are dry, I install them using the Craig jig for the pocket screws. So, admittedly, I did toss around the idea of filling in the pocket holes after I had the shelves installed so that the finish would just be that much better. I really didn't think that it was going to be much of an issue because neither of the shelves are so high that you really can see it unless you're down on the ground looking up. So I decided to save time and effort and just move on. And now, after I finished the whole piece, looking back while I'm editing this, I realized that I could have just stepped my overall finish up that much more by not skipping that step. Yeah, like they say, the devil's in the details, and when you skip one little thing that could make the overall finish better, you're just reducing that price tag at the end of the project. I mean, you can see right here, I'm taking the time to mix up and fill in the big gaps on the front face of these particle board shelves. And at the time, I know what I was thinking. I was thinking that I needed to make this solid base for my trim to nail into because I know this particular wood filler is strong enough after it hardens that you can install hardware into it. So there was a structural reason for it, but I still can't understand why I didn't take the time to go ahead and fill the pocket holes at the same time. And then later I go ahead and sand that flush and get everything nice and solid for the trim to be installed against. After filling in the nail holes and wiping back the overfill, I set into installing the crown. Now, here is another area that takes some thought. The general rule is upside down and backwards. I usually use a crown jig because I install crown in interior spaces. And the crown jig makes the whole process that much easier because it holds the correct angle for the crown to set against while you're cutting it. But this is already packed away and stored in Tennessee, so for right now I'm going to have to do a couple extra steps in order to get this crown cut just right. Oh, yeah, and this is how I'm going to keep my angle the same. Because believe me, you can think you're holding your crown flush to the back of the saw, but one edge of that trim has a little bit of a slope to it. So it really is easy for this piece of crown to kind of slide up or down while you're making your cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and put my piece back into the saw up to the blade where I made my first cut and make a mark. I'm then going to extend that line across the left and right side bed of the saw so that I'll be able to have a continual straight line and make sure that my crown is even to that every time I make cuts from here on out. I've got my main front piece cut, both sides at the correct angle. I need to make sure that I get my returns cut correctly. The direction of your cut all depends on an inside or an outside corner. It's actually too confusing to really run through that quickly for a good understanding. So if any of you would like better instruction on how to install crown molding so that your pieces can have that nice extra detail, then leave a comment below. I'd be happy to prepare an actual video tutorial that shows how to install crown molding. Putting my whole entire corner unit onto the floor gives me leverage to install my crown while holding the piece in place. Here you can see I'm making an adjustment to that corner of the particle board. It didn't have quite the correct angle for the crown and was hanging over on that inside corner. Now that it's all flush, my piece fits in just perfect, and I just now need to cut it to the correct length, which on that end will be a straight cut. I'm not worried about this piece splitting out when I nail it in because it's such a soft wood. But I still don't want the top moving out of position, so I'm going to go ahead and tape it into place until the glue dries. And of course, another round of wood filler. And also I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and smooth in the roughest parts of the particle board that's on the top surface of the shelves. I'm not worried about having perfection here because two reasons. One, I know the finish that I'm going for is going to be a textural, chippy, kind of old world look. But I also know that all of the layers of chalk paints and stuff that I'm going to be adding along the way will tend to fill in some of the imperfections too. I just don't want big, deep gouges that would be unsightly after the piece is finished. Here is the moment you've all been waiting for. How is this oversized painting coming into play on this piece?
Now this is where you probably are thinking that I've lost it. Let's see what I can do.
Well, Actually, this is what kicked this whole project into gear. I was giving this piece and several other pieces by one of my favorite clients who's turned into a very good friend. They had just been sitting in storage for so long, they just wanted these pieces moved on so that they could find a new home and actually be used again. Now, before anyone gets really upset with me about cutting into this piece, let me explain. This canvas is actually damaged. It has some overstretched areas pushed in from the back side of it. There is about a 2-inch cut in it and a lot of black marks that won't wash off. Not to mention that the whole entire frame is warped. Besides, I've already got another piece that isn't even quite this big, and it's a beautiful cherry blossom portrait, and it has not sold, and it's been in my booth for sale for several months. So I just didn't think the condition that this particular replica is in that it would sell. So I figured this piece's best chance was by cutting it into smaller pieces of art that could still be collaged together. And that's when I discovered what really needed to be done with this bifold door. You see, all the work up to this point has just been in prep for this piece. By cutting it into these smaller pieces of art and installing it into the panels of the bifold, I'm using a wallpaper paste that pushes it nice and tight and flush against the wood surface, which is resolving any of the overstretched issues or the cut in the canvas. And as I layer on the paints and add different texturing methods to this piece, it will be blending the art piece into the wood piece. It will also be obscuring any of those unwanted black marks. And as an added bonus, it just converts this oversized wall decor piece into a functional piece, which gives it a better opportunity to be loved. But I'm really going to have to warn you here. This is actually going to look worse before it starts to look better. I mean, in one of these stages, it actually looks like a total disaster. But you will see that it all pulls together by the end. To get started, I'm just going to say I'm using all Dixie Belle products for this painting stage because that's what I have on hand. And by no means am I a Dixie Belle creator. I don't get paid by Dixie Belle. I don't get free products by Dixie Belle. I choose to support small local businesses, and my vendor neighbor is a Dixie Belle supplier. So it's just easy for me to come by, but also supports her small business. So as you see all of my different videos and a lot of times using Dixie Belle, it is not because Dixie Belle is supporting me. I start my layering process with Mohave, which is in the silk line, because it's a leftover product from a set of tables that I have done earlier in the year. And it's a good start for covering this dark wood tone, but it also is a nice deep mustard yellow that will be nice to be seen as little highlights of color coming through to the end finish, because those are some colors that are also in the oil painting replica. I then immediately lie the piece down and mist it with water to keep the paint moist, while I sprinkle some of the sea spray over the painted areas. Like I said, I want some of this mustard yellow to peek through to the end after I layer on everything. So this sea spray is going to keep some of the next layers of paint from covering all of the mustard yellow color and allow me to bring that back to the surface at the end. I do this one side at a time just because gravity is needed in this technique. Then my next layer is chocolate, which is in the chalk mineral paint series. This was left over from my 1927 antique desk and simple chair. I don't have enough for the whole piece, but that's fine. I just want some darker areas and I just choose where I want it to go. I then go ahead and follow that layer up with misting it with water to keep the paint moist and putting the sea spray on. And if I didn't mention it earlier, after the sea spray is sprinkled onto the piece, I do mist it again to dampen all of the sea spray to get it to stick to that section. I do the exact same thing with colored greens, which is also a chalk paint, and it's left over from my little table, huge work, and Nova's spice cabinet projects. I go ahead and skip showing this because it's exactly the same as the chocolate layer. I don't have enough for the whole piece, but I don't want it on the whole piece either. So I just pick and choose where I want that color to show through, and I follow that up with the sea spray technique as well. Now we're moving on to the next main layer, which is also chalk mineral paint, and this is in the color of Mud Puddle. Now, this is a paint that I do have on hand, but I'm just opening it up for the first time on this project. So I guess you can say I bought this product for this project. This is a nice medium neutral color, so I'm doing full coverage over the whole piece, covering all the previous layers. The sea spray will reveal the other colors used in the end, but I'm still not done yet. My last layer is white. I'm using salt water, which is in the Silk line. This is a product that is kind of a standard on my shelf that's used in little bits on several different projects. And there's very little amount of it used on this project as well because I am just dry brushing this onto kind of the whole piece, but since it's dry brushing, there's a lot of surface area that it's not covering. So, the moment you've been waiting for, now that all of my paint layers are on, what am I going to do? Well, any of you who have watched any other creators work with sea spray, you're expecting what I'm going to do next. I'm coming back in and scraping all of these layers back. And I start out with this multi-use tool scraper thing, and I'm not really liking it. It's not digging in enough. So I go ahead and switch it up to my actual stripper scraper. I don't know if that's what it's called. This works much better getting in underneath more layers to that very bottom layer of sea spray that I put on. So this is what's going to expose bits of colors of every step of the way. And at this point you're probably seeing a lot of white, but once you come in after it's all done and clean up all of your debris and wash it down, that's when all of the colors are going to be revealed. And now, after all of the rough scraping is done, I do a quick sanding just to smooth out the surface and knock off any of those last loose chunks that might still be hanging on, you know. This all caused a huge mess, so I want to go ahead and clean up my project and my space before moving on. Next, I'm going to protect what I've done already by spraying it with a couple coats of Minwax polyurethane. I love the warm satin finish, but I feel on this piece the warmth within that finish will help highlight and bring out all of those different bits of color. I love this finish because it's easy to apply and like I said, it just deepens the color. You're probably wondering, am I going to address the back of the piece? I'm using my sandcastle paint, which is left over from my Whitecap dining set project. It's just a nice medium tone that is also neutral that will not only freshen the back, but it will tie into the front as well. I do 2 coats for solid coverage, but I'm not making you watch all of that. That's really not the interesting part of this project. For my very last detail on this project, I'm going to add some depth to this piece. I used Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax in the brown, and I brush it into all of the deep areas of the corners and trim edges. And then I go ahead and do the edges of the panels and darken the corners for a decorative effect. I really feel that this step adds a depth to the piece and finishes it off, adding an overall balance to the piece. Now, since I have droned on and probably irritatingly so, I will shut up and let you enjoy the final reveal in peace. I don't know about you, but I just love this piece. It turned out way better than I even imagined. Knowing that I finally completed something that's been on my mind to do for a long time, but I just didn't quite know what to do with it, all of these pieces came together in the end. And knowing that I built this by hand out of everything that I already had left over from previous projects just makes me really happy to see all of these products used in a way that really turned out amazing. If I had to put a price on the amount that I put into this project, I would say probably under $25. You could say that I purchased the mud puddle paint just for this project, and that's $15.95 for an 8-ounce container. And then to just throw out a number to cover other expenses such as finish nails, screws, glue, polyurethane, what else? Anyways, say $10 because everything else was either given to me or scrap material anyways. So I'm going to say I'm all in on this project for $25, probably under. If you're curious to see how much I sell it for, don't hesitate to check in on my social media sites, Facebook or Instagram. That's usually where I update this kind of information. Well, before I go, we got to take care of the normal business, right? Please don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button. And as always, until next time, stay safe out there. If you're interested to see what I come up with, stick to me. Stick to me. Like Velcro. I'm not sure about any of that. Okay. Really, there's more to it than just this one oversized replica of water lilies.